Hi, everyone, and welcome to Forget Me Not Radio, the podcast where we discuss taboo topics and other issues society would rather silence. My name is Amy Dommett, and I'm your host. Last week, Rosie shared her story of abuse and heartbreak. But as we all know, just because you leave an abusive relationship, that does not mean that suddenly your world is a better place. Leaving is only the first step in the journey to peace. Today, we continue Rosie's story, giving you a glimpse into life after abuse, divorce, the ongoing behaviors of an abuser, and how children are often used as a ploy to get back at a victim for leaving their abuser. I'm very grateful to Rosie for being so open and sharing this very raw and painful story. If you would like more information about Forget Me Not Radio, you can visit amydommett.com/podcast. There you can learn about upcoming episodes and guests, as well as support this project through patreon.com or PayPal. It is through supporters like you that we are able to bring this podcast series to you. Subscribe to us on iTunes and stay up to date with new episodes. And if you are already a subscriber, we would love to have you rate and review us. Your feedback is important to our growth and to helping others find us. Thank you for joining us today for Rosie's Story Part 2. I will see you on the other side, where happiness and beauty reside. Rosie, thank you for being with us here again today.
Hello.
So, last time when we left off, you had just gotten to the point where you had decided to finally leave your husband, and you were dealing with the courts and your restraining order, and you were actually getting ready. You talked a little bit about it, but you were getting ready to file your restraining order. So, why don't we pick up there and tell us about that process, what you had to do, what you had to explain, all of that.
Sure. So basically, after my ex attacked me, police convinced him to leave the house. And again, I didn't know all of my rights and that I should have insisted that he get arrested, this and that. I was completely shook up. So I'm just, operating the best I can. And the best I can was that, okay, well, what do people do when they have legal issues with someone? You go to your lawyer. And I already had a divorce attorney. So before his office was even open, I was in the parking lot waiting for his office to open the next morning.
Ready to tell your nerves. That shows where your nerves were.
Yeah, at that time I was... I know so much more now, but
Right.
Back then I just thought, okay, well, you go to a lawyer, you get a good lawyer, and the lawyer directs you and guides you in what to do. So I waited for the lawyer's office to open. People kind of came into the parking lot, and finally the front, they opened the door for me, and I said I need to speak to the lawyer, and they said, oh, well, he's actually preparing for trial. He's really busy today. I said, well, it's very urgent. I need to file a restraining order or protective order. And they said, okay, well, we'll pass your message on. And I was like, okay. And I had a friend who was traveling in from out of town. She was actually traveling in to a couple of hours away from where I was because we were planning on visiting the city. So I had my young child with me, my son. And I said, okay, well, I guess we'll go still see her. I just kind of told her, she knew what had happened. But I said, I'm still going to obviously pick you up from the airport and all this. And I said, just... we'll figure it out. So I start driving, and all of a sudden I get a phone call, and it's my lawyer, and he says, turn around. I know you're on your way to this other city. Turn around. Somebody in my office, one of my staff members, I guess his paralegal is going to help you. And we're going to get this filed today. I said, okay, great. And I turned back around, and I called my friend, said, sorry, you're going to have to wait at the airport for a couple of hours while I take care of this. And she understood, of course. And again, I was just relying on the people who I thought were in the field to guide me. And I met with the paralegal, and I kind of told them a couple of paralegals, and I told them what happened. And I said, do we need to add more or less? And He said, no, that should be enough. And I just asked for some guidance about everything, what's going to happen. And they just told me, well, we're going to file it today. We'll know the same day. And basically, we think everything should be fine. I said, okay, this is enough details. Do you need no more? No, this is enough. So I went and I, finished that, went up to spend, the day with my friend. We actually stayed out of town. She had a hotel, and I didn't hear anything from the lawyer's office. And the next day we're driving back down, and I was assuming that, okay, well, I'll be able to go into the house. He'll be out of the house. And I call on the way back, and the paralegal says, oh, yeah, sorry, it didn't get approved. The judge denied it. I said, what? You guys didn't even call me about this? She said, yeah, oh yeah, well, it happens sometimes. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I mean, I'm trying to go back to the house now. Normally if this hadn't happened, my ex would be, or at that point, to be ex, but my ex would, have time with our child, because we'd already started this informal kind of splitting time or custody type of thing. And they just, the paralegal said, well, your lawyer's not available. Let me try another lawyer in the office. And she called me back and said, well, it's really, really bad if you don't let him see his son, his child. That's really, really awful. And I've been hearing that for a little while. That is like, I don't know if you want to call it a silver bullet, a magic sort of thing.
You don't do that.
Yeah, you don't do that. It's taken very, very seriously, and it takes a lot. I mean, basically the way... Now, I've even heard this later, is that basically no matter what, unless the person's actively trying to kill somebody, hurt the child, you're supposed to let them go with the child. If it's not the sort of thing where police need to intervene on an emergency 911 basis, you have to let them go with the child. And that was what I heard then too. And so this just put me in a tailspin. And I also remember asking the paralegal, well, why was it denied? And they said lack of evidence. And I was like, okay. And
what kind of things did you put in it? If you could elaborate on what you had versus maybe what you learned that you didn't have,
I'm trying to remember what I put. I think I very basically said that, he violated my space, attacked me, took away my phone, wouldn't let me leave the room. And has threatened me before. And I think it was very short and to the point. I remember saying, well, should I describe, explain more?
Right.
This is exactly where he put his hands, and this is, so on and so forth. And I don't know, I just, at least the impression I got was that, this is enough. This is enough. You don't need to really heavily, he put his hand here, he pushed me against this, I fell and got this bruise. And I may have mentioned that, certain bruises I got, but
right.
It just wasn't. I didn't go into this whole narrative. It was just sort of this is what he did, and this is why I'm afraid. And
right.
The way they made me kind of feel was I just have to say I'm scared, and that's enough.
Right.
And me not having exposure to the legal system, I thought, maybe it's like what you hear on TV or those stories you hear about people you can always I'm going to do a restraining order against that person. They bother me too much. And every state has different laws. The laws apply differently. So if in one state, maybe they're very, anybody who wants a restraining order, you get it. That's definitely not the case in Florida, apparently, or at least in my county where this happened. And
just by virtue of the fact that they have, you have to have it put in front of a judge. The judge has to read it and decide and make it a ruling.
Yeah.
It's obviously more detailed. We have an interview coming up. It'll be obviously later down the line, but with a family law attorney that works with domestic violence victims. So this will be something interesting, for me to bring up with her and get maybe more specific information about, what does a restraining order need to say? Obviously, you don't want to lie and you don't want to exaggerate, because that's not, not going to put you in a good place. But there's a line there between sharing what happened and being specific enough in your details, because this very often is a life or death situation. And I know a lot of people, myself included, I didn't get a restraining order, but I chose not to even go for it. It was a different situation, mind you. I didn't live under the same roof. I had my own place at that point. But I didn't feel it was worth the paper it was written on. My attitude was, if he wants to come after me, if he wants to find me, he will. And if he's crazy enough to come after me, then he doesn't care that there's a piece of paper that says he's not allowed to. But
yes, absolutely. And
it's a hard balance.
It is really hard. And for me, I know my case isn't one of the most extreme, severe cases. I know a lot of things people bring up is, why didn't you leave? And I left pretty soon after, basically the second, third time that he was physical with me. And this is the time, actually, this is like the first time he physically made contact finally, like actual contact and did actual harm, leaving a mark. I left right after that. So in a way, I guess I'm supposed to be that, oh, you did a good job, you left her right away. But now the flip side of that I'm seeing is that they're sort of treating it as, I'm guessing maybe the judge didn't say this necessarily, but maybe some people are seeing it as, or the judge was seeing it as like, oh, this is an isolated incident. But when you look at all the other things he was doing and building up to it, and guess what? After the fact he's been doing, a year plus out, I think it shows a pattern. And I do feel fortunate that he hasn't tried to physically attack me again. He has talked about killing me and all that sort of stuff, and is doing all sorts of other things to hurt me. But then I have a strong safety plan where I make it very hard for him to know exactly my whereabouts. I really pushed back on, even through the custody with our child process, about he doesn't really need to know exactly the address of X, Y, and Z and exactly what we do all day. But it's interesting because even talking to DV advocates, some of them say like they expect you to be like multiple witnesses, a security camera, being up so bad you're in the hospital before they say, oh yeah, you have enough evidence sometimes. And then I'll hear random stories about two people were fighting and someone else observed it and they only arrested the man. And so it's really hard to know. I mean, I spoke to a lawyer the other day, just someone who had referred me to speak to him maybe about because I have ongoing issues with my ex and, with my abuser. And he was saying that, a lot of times, especially in family law and domestic violence, it's sort of a gamble. Sometimes the judge, hits it right on the head, and sometimes the judge has, this quick little hearing and is just going to do their best guess. Yes, if you go through, this really long trial and like full discovery where you go through every little piece of evidence and you really examine everything and totally apply the law, that takes a long time, and you might get then the right judgment, or like, go all the way to appeals, like basically the full, the
full gamut.
The full legal treatment. But when it's just that quick, okay, you have that like, quick hearing, it's really a luck of the draw. And that has been my experience too. And, with my experience, kind of going back to what happened, so, and actually I'm remembering again now, actually I think with that first lawyer I had, what his paralegal said wasn't necessarily lack of evidence. She said something more like, the judge didn't think it was urgent. It was something like that.
Same thing. Basically.
Yeah, basically
there wasn't enough information there to show that you were in any real danger.
Yeah, not enough information, and not really guidance. What do I do? And at this point, I hadn't spoken to. I'd been speaking to the domestic violence hotline to get advice, but I just didn't know what to do. So everyone's scaring me, had been scaring me for a while, like, let the child go. So my friend goes with me, we let my child go. I'm just a complete wreck. Where do I sleep tonight? What do I do? Spent the next few days just trying to figure it out, and then finally reached out to a personal friend who's a domestic violence advocate. And she was one who, and I think we might have talked about this last time, but she urged me to go to Victim Services, which is at the courthouse. It's a government-run, government-sponsored agency, which in my case I think was a positive, because they don't have any personal vested interest in whether you get one outcome or another, other than hoping everyone's safe, everyone gets a fair, keeping everybody safe, everyone gets fair treatment in the law. They're not trying to build up legal hours or whatever.
Let me stop you for a minute, because I want to ask you. You've hit a number of important parts that I don't want to gloss over. And one of the things, well, first of all, where did you go that night? Did you go back home and try to work it out, or did you stay elsewhere?
No, I didn't speak to him at all. At that point, I don't think, in fact, I think the last time I spoke to him was the night he attacked me. That's the last time I've verbally spoken to him outside of like a court mediation or something. Right. My friend was with me. We snuck into the house, actually. it's ridiculous when I think about how we snuck into the house to try to get some of my things. And actually, I think she was with me, and she said, let's just sleep in the guest bedroom. It's the way the house is set up is that the guest bedroom is kind of right near the entrance. So, and that, according to the kind of arrangement, that I had with my ex, that's how it's supposed to be anyways, that, we sort of switch rooms, and I won't get into it because it's kind of complicated to explain and maybe not relevant, but basically, we snuck into the guest bedroom quietly after we thought he was asleep. And then I remember we're both in there being quiet, just thinking, let's just stay here, let me get some things, we're just trying to figure out what to do. And we hear him come downstairs, and we freeze. And the door is locked, and he ends up opening the door. And my friend was like, my friend walked up. So, I'm trying to remember exactly how it happened, but basically she kind of walked up maybe so he would see she's there and not be as afraid. And he opened it and then closed it and left. So, and it was locked. So he, but there's, if a lot of,
you pop the lock.
You pop the lock, you put like a screwdriver or whatever. He might have done that. And, I think, after that, I don't think I stayed in the house ever again. My friend, I think, left the next day. I took her back to the airport. And after that, I stayed at a friend's house. I stayed in a hotel. It was, after that, I was like, I can't deal with this. I could barely sleep that night. I'm laughing about it now because it's like, why did I subject myself to that? Because at that point still, there was, when you start talking to other people, you have to get your things from home, don't let him keep things. And it's, my safety is more valuable. And I've already, guess what? I still haven't gotten so many things from the house a year plus later, and I've sort of given up on it. It'd be nice someday I do get some of my things back, like my photos. Right. Oh, jewelry, forget it. Money, cash, that was in the safe.
It's there.
Forget it. Yeah, it's
gone. That's another power move for a lot of abusers. I know, because I pretty much, as you did, announced my leaving, which is insane and breaks every rule of safety planning known to man. But, I was hard-headed and I was angry, and I was at that point where I believe you mentioned before, where I was scared of him, but at the same time, I just didn't care anymore, which is sad. And, I was to the point where, he had threatened my life. I was just like, go ahead, kill me. You would never know that talking to me now. But then I literally thought, what if I have to lose? What's the worst that can happen? Oh, you're going to make me dead? Okay, please, by all means do, because life sucks. And I can't deal with this anymore. And this is killing me. And I think there was that part of me also that just didn't believe him. So there was a mixture of fear. There was a mixture of believing that he would never go through with his threats. But when I look back and I see all the things that he did go through with, it was likely just a matter of time. You mentioned personal belongings. I know because I announced that I was leaving, and I, told him that I would be going to the house while he was on vacation with his family, a vacation that we were supposed to be on together, and I said, no, I'm not going. And I said, I will clean out my things while you're gone. He wasn't happy about that, obviously, but he took all of my important paperwork and the lockbox. He locked it. He took the keys with him on a cruise, and he locked it in the trunk of his car. And it's a total control move, because now I don't have access to my passport, to my birth certificate, to our marriage certificate, to anything. My social security card, all of my important documents. Again, the safety planning, which we will cover at some point, covers all of these things, and I was not prepared. And
I was laughing because it's funny. At the time, you're so you get whipped up into like this emotional kind of state, and it's kind of just showing a little bit of control. You're fine, go ahead and kill me. You're miserable. You feel hopeless. You're like, is there any hope for me? I'm stuck here. It's just, you feel miserable. You say things, and it's funny because now that I've kind of gotten more control of myself, understand who I am again, put myself first, I would be a lot more smart about it. I wouldn't tell them what I'm up to. And I remember
exactly.
And I kind of laughed. It's like, I'm going to do this and that. And the thing is, I guess I had been building up to it because he had tried, like the first time he even tried to physically attack me, I went right into like, how dare you do this? And so he already kind of knew that I was like pushing back on all that. And we had been going to counseling as well. So there was some stuff going on with that. And, it's funny, like now, I mean, when I meet women or men, well, I mostly have met women. I've met some men, but haven't gotten this far in discussing with them, like planning and all that. But I kind of tell them, like, can you be like really kind of just strategic and stay quiet and wait till this and that. I said, listen to your lawyer, do what you feel is best, do what's safe. And a lot of times they just can't. They're like, I don't think I can take it. I don't think I can be that plan ahead and be, sort of wait till he's on a business trip and then, grab all your personal things or whatever. And it's interesting.
That there actually, I think, is really important too, because there's this moment, I think, in a lot of women's minds where all of a sudden they realize that they're being abused. And all of a sudden they realize that they just can't take it anymore. And it's almost simultaneous. It's just like, it has been building up and building up and building up over months, years, decades perhaps. And you put up with so much, and your thought processes are so messed up, for lack of a better term, so just irrational. And you just get to this breaking point, and that, I don't know, but perhaps, it fuels everything, because what do you do when you get to that breaking point? You threaten to leave. You do leave. You yell back. You fight back, because you just snap. And you're not, even with my divorce, again, I didn't have children, which made it a lot easier. We didn't have a house. We didn't have any real material possessions. So even with my marriage, I was so anxious to be done with him and just wipe my hands of him and never see him again. I went from he was the love of my life and doing everything I could to fix it to I need you out of my life now. And then you're irrational for a different reason. So then you're making poor decisions, you're rushing things, you're putting yourself in harm's way. You're not safety planning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm so different now, and I'm trying to remember back to how I was then, and it's very interesting to reflect, because what I did when the lawyer led, or I guess lawyer's office, I don't know how much my lawyer actually had seen the petition for, the restraining order or protection against injunction and something like that, but basically the restraining order, I met with the DV advocate, domestic violence advocate. And then she told me to go to victim services. I filled it out in a lot more detail. They looked up stuff about him that I didn't know. They said, he has some stuff on his record. And I said, well, I know he had gotten arrested, but he told me that got thrown out. Oh, no, he was on probation, misdemeanor probation, not as bad as a felony, I guess. But still, he had some consequences. I found out he had been going against those rules he had related to that. It just... I remember my eyes just being so big, I can't believe that. And I think that was maybe even relevant to me filling out that form that, oh, by the way, he's on misdemeanor probation right now for this, these charges or whatever this was. And what ended up happening with that was I didn't get the immediate temporary 2-week restraining order, but I did get a hearing. At least I got a hearing 2 weeks from then to go in front of the judge. Now, in the meantime, so my ex had the child for a few days, and we had, switched over to have the child. And I think that was with probably around the same, few days, or within the same day or time range that I had, applied for the restraining order and everything. And I remember the clock started ticking. Victim services told me, look, he's going to get served probably tomorrow. I was like, what do I do? I can't keep on, bouncing around at friends' houses, this and that. And they said, okay, well, we can refer you to a domestic violence shelter. So they did. And I remember I'd called that domestic violence shelter earlier, and they had told me, oh, no room. And I'd called them because the domestic violence hotline had referred me to them. And it was just interesting when, perhaps it's true that they didn't have room, didn't have beds. I don't know. I'm not sure what goes on. But basically I was able to get in finally and picked up my son and we went. And this was crazy because I remember speaking to the domestic violence advocate I knew, and we knew each other as professionals, and she said, domestic violence shelters, battered women's shelters are scary places. And I said, what? She says, yeah, you're going to see all people from all types of backgrounds, all walks of life. And just prepare yourself because you're going to meet people that you probably don't interact with in this way. And I started realizing that's true. I mean, going into shelters, basically you're homeless. And people who have resources may stay in a hotel, may have their lawyer fighting for them, whatever the case may be. They may fly away. For me, I probably could have gotten help. I probably could have stayed in a hotel. But the way my ex was being and the fear I had, I knew that in a domestic violence shelter, he couldn't track me. He couldn't find me. And I was listening to my gut properly because we were in the shelter. My mother flew into town to sort of just help for, a couple of weeks. She stayed in a hotel. And, until the hearing, she was just coming to kind of help and support. And my ex found her hotel somehow. We still don't know how. I had somebody check out the car for a tracking device. They didn't find a tracking device, but, it was, they really couldn't get in the guts. It was a luxury car where everything's kind of sealed and, there's a computer and we weren't quite sure. But basically he, was with my mom at her hotel, and all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, and it's the police, and somehow he said, your ex is here in the parking lot with his family. He brought his whole family. They all came into town, and all we're going to do here is a welfare check. I showed them the documentation, said, look, officer, he's been served. This was a few days later. He's been served, and we have a hearing next week. This was about halfway through, because it's about 2 week gap between, until you get the hearing, but he's been served, and I'm staying in a battered women's shelter. I don't know how he found me here. He should be going through the lawyers. Even though at that point I was sort of done with my lawyer, and I'd found another lawyer at that point. And so fortunately the officer, helped me get into basically a taxi, because we were like, I'm leaving the car here. Leaving the car here. He helped me get into a taxi, and then, we went back to the shelter. My mom stayed there. My mom told me later that night, apparently she heard noise outside, and it was my ex going through the car that I left, my car. Oh my goodness. It was just, it's crazy to think back. And, the lawyer, that first lawyer, I was very disappointed with what happened, and I was just sort of over it. I was trying to find a second lawyer. This was around the holidays. So it was hard. Yeah. But I found somebody, and it's funny, I even remember thinking the first lawyer I'd hired is kind of a more expensive lawyer, has a big office, the nice office and all this. And this other lawyer is like sort of a hanger shingle up type, where she's just kind of, one person show doing the whole thing. And less expensive. And I remember thinking to myself, at this point I was still thinking a lawyer's going to help me get through this, right? A lawyer's going to save me. So I thought, well, I've had the expensive lawyer. Let me try a cheap lawyer. Maybe, the expensive lawyer is too distracted by too many cases. I need somebody who, sort of
looking to make her way.
Yeah, looking to make her way, maybe hungry to be successful, whatever it is. And she was very responsive. I'd call her. She gave me a flat rate to get me through the domestic violence stuff. And I wasn't, we weren't quite sure she would be able to do the family stuff. Long story short, all this happens. And then a few days later, we have the hearing. And actually, what I remember that lawyer telling me was a few days before the hearing, she said, look, I think we should subpoena the officers that came that night. I think we should do this and this and that. And I think we should extend this hearing. There's some legal term for it, but basically extend it to 2 weeks from now. And I told her, and I told her, I'm in this domestic violence shelter. I'm grateful to be there, but I don't want to be there 2 more weeks. Yeah. And she said, okay, let's just go for it. Let's just go for it. And I hung up the phone, and then I spoke to a DV advocate, and I thought about it, and I was like, wait a minute, actually, I want the right scenario to come out. If she's thinking she's not, we need some evidence here, maybe, based on what happened the first time, where I thought my word was enough evidence, maybe we should do it. I call her back, she's like, no, don't worry about it. Let's just go for it. I think we have enough. Well, we went to the hearing, and I remember her eyes popped open when she saw the legal team that my ex had. My ex didn't just have his family law lawyer, his divorce lawyer. He had his criminal defense attorney had been using, who is a very, very prominent guy, a type that's in the news for how prominent he is himself, and this kind of VIP guy. And I think some other lawyers were there, and and she was like, "Oh my gosh, your ex has this particular attorney," and And it was interesting, and I was like, oh my gosh, let's see what happens. And, just went into the hearing, and basically the way I experienced it, and I don't know if there's a record of it. It'd be interesting someday to read back.
There should be.
Read back or hear back. I don't know if it was like a written record or a recorded record, but to sort of hear what happened, because basically I feel like my ex's attorney made me seem like I'm straight out of the Real Housewives, that I'm just this very materialistic, very self-centered person, and that I'm just always nagging my ex, and I just made all this up, and they're just bringing up things that just have no relevance to me. But I also realized that your lawyer can object, but once they've already said it, and I know the judge is technically supposed to cut that out of their mind, it's already in their brain, right? It's already in there.
Planted.
Yeah, and this is sort of like the strategy, I guess, of law. And, having been married to a lawyer, I kind of, I might not know, I don't think my ex knew the law as a lawyer himself, but, he kind of knew strategy and stuff like, bury them in discovery and like all these, threaten them. And so I feel like, that's just how I kind of observed it and what my guess was. But basically the judge said, denied, lack of evidence, preponderance of evidence, and then basically gave me a little brief lecture about not letting a father see his son. And I was in the battered women's shelter, and I remember debating, like, well, how can I have my son go with him? This makes no sense. I'm prohibited here at the shelter from letting my son
seeing him,
like that's breaking the rules. Plus I'm afraid for my life. So it doesn't make sense. Why would I send my son with somebody who I'm bringing up has addiction issues, has anger issues, has been violent with me? And I guess, you get the right lawyer or a team of lawyers, and you build an amazing legal team. They make a great case. And I think even that lawyer I had at the time, she even said, like, I think the judge's wife and his wife golf, like they're friends on some committee. And that was just, it was really emotionally hard. Is really emotionally hard. I mean, obviously I didn't get the restraining order, so now I have to go to plan B, C, D, E, figure out what I'm doing. And just, I really felt like the justice system let me down. And, first I felt like the police let me down because they didn't really tell me, we can arrest him. Justice system letting me down. I'm starting to feel, I started feeling like, wow, it's kind of true. You can buy yourself justice. If you have money and power, or money and connections, you can get yourself the best legal representation possible and really get out of almost anything. And I kind of knew that. You hear stories in the news.
It happens all the time.
And I was thinking, like, wait a minute, we're not like multimillionaires, billionaires here. I mean, we make okay money, obviously, the professions I'm ex were in, but we're not like these extreme means type of people. But even in this situation, it's enough. And
in many situations, this is often a tactic. And you're talking about abusive people. I don't care if they're the male or if they're female. Abusive people never, or narcissistic people, they don't take responsibility for their own actions. And because of that, because they fully believe that they are right, I think that that's what enables them to convince everybody around them that they're right. I had situations, and it's just because I like to tie our stories together because I think there's a lot of similarities. I mean, not completely, obviously, but our husbands, we've talked off of here and on here, and there's a lot of similarities in our exes. And, they don't necessarily, quote unquote, fit the bill of what an abuser looks like. They're both very intelligent men that were highly educated, that were well loved and liked in their community. And I think people often miss that piece. And those people who are, you run into them every day. You run into these individuals that even me or you, that we think we've got this nailed. Like, okay, now we know what these people look like. And I found myself good friends with people that are just as horrible an individual as my ex was. And I've been friends with them for years. And it's not until you're in the right situation with those people that you see their true colors. And in the legal system, sadly, I think this happens a lot. And this is one of the things that I want to delve into with this. Again, to educate people, but to educate victims, to educate the legal community. There are a lot of attorneys out there that are just blind. There are a lot of attorneys out there, like you said earlier, they're looking for that billable hour. They don't care how they get it, sadly. As someone that worked in the criminal justice system long enough to know that I didn't want to stay there, I've seen plenty of people buy their way out of a verdict. Buy their way out because they can hire somebody that is able to spin it. And like you say, once that seed is planted, whatever. The jury's heard it. The judge has heard it. You want to tell them they're not allowed to think about that or they're not allowed to consider that? They're human. People hear things, they remember it. Even if they're told they have to let it go, that becomes a blurry line. And for victims that are trying to fight, and you would think, this isn't getting a restraining order against him, isn't a criminal. He's not getting put in jail. He's being told he can't come near you. That's all he's being told, that he has to leave you alone. And to him, that is so bad that he's willing to lie to his attorneys. And they, in turn, are willing to try to make you look as bad as possible. I've heard women that have had alcohol, drugs, lack of a job, family issues brought up, past marriages brought up. They will find anything that they can find. In your case, she's comes from a well-to-do family, and therefore, like you said, you must be, you must just be one of those hoity-toity, snobby wives that's materialistic and is just making things up because he didn't buy you whatever it is you wanted. So it's like, it's sad that attorneys will do that. And I know personally it bothers me a lot because I'm like, as an attorney, I get that everybody deserves their defense. But how can you do that and potentially put someone's life at risk because somebody's paying you?
Yeah, and that's, I try to see things fairly, like, okay, it has to be the right punishment or the right verdict, right? And it shouldn't be too severe and it shouldn't be too lenient. And it's hard, and it's, all the time. Now that I have that kind of far, I've gone through a lot more after this, we actually got divorced and all that. I know all the time, my ex's attorney, I'd see her, she was shocked by the things we're bringing out, and I'd gotten smarter. In some ways, thinking back to not getting that restraining order, I really wonder if it might have been for the best, for a couple of reasons. One, it forced me to learn a lot of other skills to protect myself, because, like you mentioned a little bit ago, a piece of paper is not going to stop someone from wanting to kill you, hurt you, whatever they want to do.
And he's a perfect example of that. He got served. He's already told that you're seeking a restraining order. What's the first thing he does? Hunts you down, finds you, breaks into your car, basically threatens you. That's the first. That's not a normal person's reaction to being served with something that says you need to stay away from this person. Okay, let me go find them.
Yeah, I mean, if someone, served me with a restraining order, I would be so far away from them. I would only communicate through the legal channels if I needed to. I mean, I would
that's
be...
That's a normal reaction.
Yeah, would be like, wow.
I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not trying to be a problem.
Yeah, not trying to be a problem. And so one of the things was it's forced me to become strong just to better understand what I can control, which is myself, my emotions, be just internally strong, think ahead. And also, funny, by getting the restraining order, I end up, not being back at the house. And when I think about it, I've been really strong with my safety plan. I'm not around my ex. I only communicate with him through writing. Had I been at the house, he'd know where I live. He would have known where I've lived this entire time. And since he lives there, he can get in through the gate. It wouldn't cause alarm that he's entering the home, even if I change the locks. I mean, he could have come in and actually killed me. And I don't know, I don't know, like, because at that time I realized I was thinking too much, like, oh, magically the law is going to help me, the judge is going to help me, so-and-so is going to help me. And now I'm like, you know what, plan A, yes, is, in any situation, anything happens, since as part of my safety plan has been plan A, yes, of course, call the police, all that. Plan B, if the police can't get there, if the police don't do what I believe they're supposed to do, what's my plan B? And sometimes that's get in my car and drive as far away as I can. It's forced me to think of plan, not just a plan A, but B, C, D, and E. And I think
options.
Yeah, other options. And I feel sad saying this, but it's sort of life, that I can't always expect the police or the justice system to save me and help me. And sometimes I have to find other ways. And where I am today is I realize, look, in the legal arena, it's going to be very hard for me to beat my ex, or to prove anything. It's not even beating my ex. It's just like asserting my rights. Even today, I'm on the defensive. My ex is coming after me. So
where are you? So you got struck down. You lost your bid basically for a restraining order 2 times in a row. That has to be deflating. That's disappointing. It's discouraging, and and then when you're in the position you were in,
another reason it's so good that I was in the battered women's shelter was that I was around the right people and the right type of support that would understand. My parents were helpful to me to an extent, right? My mom was in town, but she didn't get it. She was just in a tailspin. How is this possible? But being at the shelter,
that she's close to the situation.
And just it's like me. This is a whole new world. We don't know what happens, and people at the shelter are like, oh, it happens. People, they get denied, and I was around the right people to sort of help me understand. And one thing you talked about is like they'll bring up the past. I think I was a little bit naive because I'm kind of a person who has an extremely clean, boring past, and I don't realize that people don't know that. You know what I mean? Like I'm I don't use substances. I'm don't really, not into alcohol. I didn't really party much. I was nerding school. I studied. I was in the engineering school. So I've been pretty boring. I just don't really do stuff. But they don't know that.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with people who do that. Just if you have addiction issues, no one has the right to hit you. I mean that's.
It's irrelevant.
It's really
irrelevant.
irrelevant.
What's going on out,
And in some ways now I'm more open that, okay, I shouldn't believe that just because I've lived this goody two-shoes life that I deserve better. I mean, I still have to be treated the same thing, which is looking at the facts and circumstances of that moment and what's led up to it. And it's weird. And I'm a little bit, I guess, grateful maybe now. Maybe not really for the judge's verdict, but grateful that I've had to grow and that I've had the opportunity to grow from what was a setback at that time and what was really emotionally hard. And being at the shelter, this is, I didn't want to be there for, 2 extra weeks. Well, I ended up being there for 2 months. I'd been there 2 weeks. I thought, great, I'm going to be out of here, back in my house. I ended up being there for 2 months. I finally started listening to what they had me do. When you go to shelter, it's not just you go hang out. They actually meet with you every week and have a plan. How are you going to get economically self-sufficient? Are you going to get a job? How are you going to take care of all these parts of your life? And they refer you to services. And I remember thinking, oh, I don't need services. I don't need help. I'm going to get money. I have all this money from my ex coming, I'm going to get this and that. And I actually needed those services. And it's been very extremely humbling to get services, sometimes from organizations that you donated to or got, helped in the past. But I'm at a point today that I'm like, you know what? If there's help, I'm going to take it. I saw something on social media recently about, it was this kid who graduated Harvard, and he said, he worked at McDonald's, and he took, he scrubbed toilets and all this sort of stuff, and, he worked so many minimum wage hours to get a laptop, and just kind of and now he finally graduated Harvard. And I remember he said something in there, I took advantage of every voucher I could. And I'm like, that's my attitude right now, that if I qualify, I will take advantage of that. I will use that because that's to help me, and it has helped me. I've gotten, assistance. I've gotten a mentor. I mean, I could have gotten a mentor, I guess, anyways. But when you're in a position of need, I can actually be open with that mentor about, I've been really down. Every time I get a rejection for applying for a job, I'm depressed for a week. Yeah. I could talk about my ex. Oh, yes.
Well, and especially, I was just going to say, especially considering your past, and if people didn't hear the first half of our interview, which I hope they would listen to them in order because it explains a lot, that you are highly educated, You had an amazing job by, societal standards. You were self-sufficient. You had money that you had turned over to your ex that you now had no access to into a, quote unquote, joint account that you no longer had access to. So, we're not talking about, I think oftentimes, people think that domestic violence is a poor problem. It happens in a trailer park or, down at the Section 8 housing. No, that's not the case. Yes, it happens in those places, but it happens at every income level. And he said, I wasn't a multimillionaire. There are multimillionaires that are in abusive situations, and it happens every day. And sometimes your income source or your ability to live at a certain income level and your lack of ability to live on your own are the reasons that people will stay in an abusive relationship. But, this is what happens. Everything about you got stripped away layer by layer by layer. And even though if people looked at you from the outside, they see a woman from a well-to-do family with a little kid and a husband that has a good job, and isn't that just nice? She lives in a nice house, or I don't know where you lived, but you get this visual of this person that is educated and has done well. So, number one, this can't possibly be happening. Abuse doesn't happen in those relationships, And number two, even if it did, well, you got enough money. But that's not the case because of the situations that led you to this point, you gave up your job. You gave up your source of income. You handed over and gave up the money and the savings that you did have in your name. And now he has control of all of that. And here you are, trying to fight him and his team of attorneys.
Yeah, and it was, I'm like a goody two-shoes. I had never carried really debt. I was the type of person that when I have a credit card, I'm just doing it for the points. I pay it off immediately. And I got to a point, I have to max out every line of credit I have to have a decent legal defense. It ended up being like a legal defense. It should really be, two people are getting divorced, but my ex went completely on the offensive against me, and although I'm,
how he did that.
Oh boy, it's
I
just
know there's
all
probably
sorts of
a laundry
things.
list, but
yeah,
examples.
So after the DV hearing, I hired another attorney. So at this point, that's my third attorney, and I met with multiple attorneys. It was really immediately the day after that hearing. I met with multiple attorneys all day. I think my dad also flew into town, and in the meantime, my ex is blowing up my parents' phone, spoofing phone calls from their zip code, from their area code. Anyways, met with different attorneys. I met one who finally said, "Let me guess what happened in that courtroom. Your ex's attorney made you seem like you're this angry woman who was out for vengeance." And I was like, "Yes." And she said, and I remember what she told me, that attorney, was, "Look, you're going to have to be so beyond good and diplomatic. This is a sort of strategy that works very well." And I was like, "Okay, you're hired. You sound good to me." And end up getting into credit and all of that. And I realized I can take a home equity line. Again, I'm the sort of person, I live within my means, right? Contrary to what my ex tried to, paint in the courtroom. I lived very much within my means up until that point. And it was like, even my parents urged me, just get a lawyer. This is too much. He's calling. You need to have somebody to deal with this. And so I end up, and I'm still dealing with that. I'm still in huge debt. It's awful, but, you get to a point where you just don't care anymore. You're just tired of this. And I guess I was still...
it has to be what's the lesser of the two evils.
It's the lesser of the two evils,
defend yourself and make sure that you are doing what's best for you and your child, which equals raising, accumulating your debt, or do you not, which then puts you in a dangerous situation.
Yeah, and I'm still figuring out what's the right balance, even today. But basically, I hired this other attorney, what did my ex do? My ex would just not respond. We'd file something, okay, discovery. That's when you're supposed to disclose all your financial statements. And a big part of that is, okay, how much are the businesses that I'm also co-owner of, how much are those worth? What assets does he have that he might be hiding? They just would not respond. That was the entire divorce process. And just everything, they just wouldn't respond. And I had this attorney, this third attorney I hired was another one of those, big attorneys, kind of very popular, maybe super lawyer, the Martindale Hubbell, has rankings. And I think she was just so busy with all the work she was getting. I don't feel like, she kind of stayed on top of things, and then just running up bills like crazy. And at that meantime, I took a temporary job. I left the shelter. I got assistance with getting into an apartment and everything. Again, I took every voucher I qualified for, and I qualified for, a transitioning kind of voucher, and everything I could get help with. Took a temporary job while actually interviewing for a job that's more similar to what I used to do. This is just kind of a temporary contract job. And with this temporary contract job, I was working with some sensitive data, so I didn't have my phone with me. And apparently that annoyed my attorney, that she couldn't reach me. It also caused issues with my ex because apparently our son was sick on my day. So we went back to kind of this like split custody thing. During the divorce process, this was something my attorney felt we should do, because again, it's so important in Florida. You have to respect father's rights, this and that. Okay. And apparently on my day, the child was sick, that the school couldn't reach me for 30 minutes. And so he blew up and made this into this huge thing. And what he basically did was constantly bullying me, not responding, dragging things out, sending me mean messages. Just all sorts of stuff. And it got to a point with my attorney that she and I just kind of agreed that maybe I should get a different attorney. I really believed in her up until that point, but months were going by and nothing was happening. I didn't have any temporary relief. It was supposed to be temporary support. Yeah. It was just all sorts of things were happening. And she said, let's just, why don't you transition to somebody else? It sounds like it's not working for us. And I agreed. So again, at this point, I probably interviewed like 15 attorneys. So I'm going back out there and interviewing more people. And then a friend refers me to somebody I'd spoken with earlier, and I just can't decide. At this point, I'm like, what attorney do I get? I get someone who's too popular. Yeah, they're good, but they're not busy. They're not available enough.
Exactly.
I'm just like, and he's not responding. How can he get away with that? People always talk about, well, they can't get away with that. They have to respond if it's in court. No, there's sort of this negotiation that goes on, and
so when you're talking about civil, it's just a paper war battle.
Oh,
sections and paper back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
that's so insightful.
To absolutely nothing except billable hours for the attorneys.
Yeah, that's so insightful that you say that. Yeah, there's not that like kind of fire burning that you got to put out or whatever. No. So at this point, I just kind of eeny meeny moe it, because I remember for me it wasn't about the money, getting money out of my ex. Yes, of course it'd be nice to have money so I don't go into debt and have my things, but it's more about our child.
And I think it's important to point out that you deserve that money, not you deserve what is yours. This isn't, talking about, fighting for child support is one thing. That is definitely deserved. But we're not talking about alimony here. And again, I'm not saying that is not deserved to a certain extent, but we're talking about money that is yours. He has money of yours locked up. You have ownership in companies that he wanted you to be part owner on, and that's locked up. That's money that is yours to have so that you can survive. This is you're not just battling for the sake of battling. This
some friends of mine, they're like, oh, you got to go for everything you can out of him, and I that. And they'd be mad, why aren't you going for everything? And I was like, I just don't want to,
It's not the right thing to do.
And my ex was, I think, taking advantage of that niceness in me or the fairness in me. I was just like, whatever the law says, I'm fine with. If I'm not going to go to Tallahassee and protest the law. 50% of marital, whatever it is fine for me. I just want what's fair. Well, my ex, and I think I knew this. I realized this later. This was a strategy even before when we were together. But he always goes for more because he knows negotiation will land you kind of in the middle. Right. So he was going for things that from before marriage, like my 401k and like things I'd inherited before marriage, like stocks and all these sort of things. And I remember he had threatened me he's going to go after alimony for me because he's, self-employed. He can, through his businesses, he can kind of manipulate his income, but I'm the type that'll most likely will work for someone. I don't think I'll do the small business thing, at least right now after being with him. He's kind of turned me off from that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and so I'm like more of a corporate type person, so I'm going to have a W-2 where it's very clear what I make. And he's like, I'm going to go after money from you. And he's just bullying me. And now I realize, like, okay, today I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, go for it. Right. But back then I was still like kind of scared. And there was that part of me that was mad. I was like, wait a minute, I'm losing so much and he's taking more from me. And those moments of hopelessness would come again and again and again. And fortunately, I knew that even though I was at a shelter, they had an outreach program, they had a support group. I started going to that support group every week. I'd been going already to Al-Anon support groups because my ex, did have some addiction issues. He's a functional addict, right? But there was the
but
extreme.
It still affected your life.
Yeah, especially like when he, when he would be drinking or using his drugs of choice. I know that filter or that kind of second guessing yourself wouldn't happen. He would just, if he was angry, he'll do something crazy, right? And just the chaos, and it was definitely cyclical. I remember, I also got counseling from victim services that helped a lot, like trauma counseling. So I was going to that, but it's still taking time, right? It's not like, I went to a few support groups and now I'm like strong and my head's on straight. It's definitely been a long process. I'm still working on that process today.
I'm still working on that process 8 years later.
Yeah.
Hate to break it to you, but you just keep getting better. You just keep getting better. It's getting better.
And sort of life skills, and it's so we go through the legal process to get this new attorney, and it's funny, he's not as sensitive to the child issues, but I guess what I liked about him, he was just more kind of to the point. He didn't. One explanation he gave me is like, look, with any sort of civil or like divorce, you can do the the Jetta divorce, or you can do the Mercedes divorce, or the Bentley divorce, or the Bugatti divorce. You can like sort of
here's your package.
Yeah, it's like how much do you want to spend? How much can you spend? And he would just explain things well. And honestly, I just kind of eeny mowed it. And he was, the lawyer I had, he actually has advanced degrees related to finance. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I don't care about the money. I just, even though you're saying it's true, I should fight with half of mine. But I was at the point, my ex had continued to kind of beat me down where I'm like, I just want freedom.
You just want to be done with it.
Just be free with it. But in a way, I think it was good to have this attorney because he caught my ex on things. And I think that financial pressure, in a way, put something on the line for my ex. And
he finally was getting called out.
Yeah, getting called out.
On his behavior.
And you can't argue numbers. So basically we got to the point where we went through another mediation, got through a lot of it. I was shocked because my ex offered alimony. And I was really like temporary alimony, which I was very shocked about. And we negotiated child support. An olive branch. Yeah, and what happened in the end? So we go through this. So we go through mediation, and my lawyer types up the final document, sends it over to his attorney. We have a final or a hearing scheduled if we can't settle right before. No response. Again, no response from his lawyer. No response from him. And we get to the hearing. We're like, I guess we're going in front of the judge then because they weren't responding. No, all of a sudden his lawyer's redone the entire agreement, and we end up spending hours and hours, right there at the courthouse. They're telling the judge, no, we're still working on something right now, last minute negotiations. So we go through, kind of settle on some things financially, and I'm like, oh, great, I guess I'm supposed to get something out of this. I get to keep what's mine. Again, like I said, my ex was going for more, and we kind of end up in the middle. We negotiate some things, and I just reaffirm things like, look, one thing I didn't mention is during the divorce process, about midway through, my ex was still doing some crazy things. He picked up my child from preschool, from daycare on my day. I showed up and walking through the classrooms. None of the teachers can find the child. His backpack is there. And then finally, I think my ex emailed me or somehow reached out to me that, I have the child. And I remember the daycare tried to kind of talk to him about it. And he's just like, no, she has to come in person. I'm like, at this point I'd gotten smarter. I know, okay, you got to document, get the police, force the police to write a police report it, call the lawyer, all this sort of stuff. So that takes a while. It's not quick when you're when it's not not a life or death emergency, right? Police take their time coming, and depending on how many things they're dealing with. Meantime, and there was a couple of police stations involved or police districts involved because where the school is versus where his house is or the house. And finally, I remember a few hours later, I call to say, okay, I'm done with the first police department. The second police department, I'm ready for you guys to go ahead and to do my report with you, and you can go do a welfare check on the house or talk to him, whatever. I said, oh, actually, your ex or your husband, I guess it was still husband, has called us and he'll meet you at the police headquarters downtown. I said, oh, okay. That's weird, but I'm like, okay, fine. Kind of know my safety plan. Okay, I'll go there carefully. The police station should be safe, but let's see what's going on. Go there. The lobby was closed by the time I got there. I think I got there right after close. The police station was still staffed, but just wasn't a front lobby open. And, so there's a buzzer, and I say, Buzz, I'm here for the exchange. I see they're here, but I need a police officer present for this. Okay, it'll be a few minutes. Okay, so I'm just kind of, standing outside, and then he steps out the door and says, you effing B word, I'm going to effing kill you, blah, 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 blah. I've not spoken to this man other than an email or through lawyers, mostly through lawyers. I've actually ignored a lot of his messages, like many, many months, right? Like since so much has happened, and he does this out of nowhere. The intercom pipes up because you're at a police station. Just think how bold he is. He knows it's being recorded. He knows, the police are there. You're at a police station, and he's talking about killing me. Intercom pipes up, says, you guys need to separate. And he seems to have this little realization, like, I don't know if he thought maybe there's not cameras recording. I don't know what he thought.
They think he's not being watched.
Yeah, or maybe it's like only, video only, not audio. I don't know what he was thinking, but a few minutes after that, he left and left the child with me, and I waited for the police, and they took my statement and everything, but... and I remember debating at that time, should we try for a restraining order again? And my lawyer was like, yeah, I'm so sorry, we should do that, and should go for it. And I said, okay, let me think about it. I go to victim services, and they say, it's probably not enough. In our opinion, it's not enough. We won't be able to help you with this.
Which is crazy, right? I mean, is that not crazy? That's crazy to me.
Yeah. You can tell somebody, I'm going to kill you. I'm going
to kill you. Yeah. I'm stalking you. I'm kidnapping your child. Basically, that's kidnapping.
That's what he did. He left
I'm taking your child to lure you in, and then I'm going to threaten you. And like you said, the audacity to do it at a police station just shows his mental... where he is, And
I was like keeping my distance from him, even the way because at this point I'd gotten stronger, right? This was, maybe half a year ago, and I was smart, I could go into a situation like I'm going into war, my senses are heightened and stuff, and so I kept my distance, so I didn't get close enough to smell him, because I really wonder though if he was on something, because I don't know, it's so really strange. Sometimes he controls himself, sometimes he doesn't, and I guess
choice.
Ultimately, choice. Ultimately, I just have to be careful. And guess what? And think about it. He said, "I'm going to kill you," and the police still didn't come for like 10 minutes, right? And like victim services told me when I spoke to them, I said, "Well, did he actually touch you? Did he try to kill you? Did he try to kill you?" No, he just said it and then he left. Once the police officer piped, the police station intercom piped up.
The sad part is that might be all that you had going for you. If you think about that, had you agreed to meet him somewhere else, what's to say that he wouldn't act on that?
Oh, yeah. And it
happens way too often. It happens all the time.
And I was talking about losing the restraining order the first time because I've had to figure out other things I've already known. I'm very strict. This is where we exchange the child, only at the child's last school, right? Or with the police officer present. Like I'm very, And
you don't have to be with him, right? So it's like you drop off.
Yeah, we've had to have some exchanges in person, and I'll tell you in a moment how those have gone. But basically that happened. So still, despite that, I told the lawyer, no, it's okay. I can't go through the emotional letdown if I don't get the restraining order again. So let's just move forward. So we get to the final hearing, right? And last minute we're getting through all these sort of things, and there's only a couple things I'm going to go in front of the judge about. Everyone's told me, all these 20 lawyers I've interviewed at this point all over town told me, it's going to be really hard to prove that he has addiction issues. It's going to be really hard to prove. You don't have a lot of proof. Well, like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, when a lawyer told me recently, it's kind of like a gambling game. Sometimes the judge hits it on the head, sometimes they don't. Well, I took the gamble. Okay, can there be restrictions on my ex? And it was a total gamble. And it's interesting. At this point, I was a lot more emotionally calm. I've been really working on myself. My ex, doesn't think he has an issue of any kind. He just thinks he's a victim of, I don't know what he thinks of me.
Yeah.
I don't know. And a victim of people who don't respect him.
Whatever it is. That's a common thing. That everything that's wrong with them is somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
It's never theirs. They are never responsible for their behavior.
And I don't remember in the first podcast if I talked about it, but my ex has had issues with partnering with people before.
I don't know that you did. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there's definitely he has something going on. Obviously, someone who reaches who wants to abuse someone, who wants to physically attack someone, and tells them, "I'm doing this to control you." Like my ex has said to me, "There's something going on, and I can't fix it. I can't make him better." And all I can do is enforce my boundaries and try to protect my son the best I can, because I had to accept that, in Florida, even felons can get 50% of their kids. Even someone who has a history, some really bad history, has lost their kids before, can get 50%. At least that's a legal climate right now. And it's very, very hard to prove otherwise. And after a lot of reflection, I was like, well, so far my son has been safe around my ex. I'm concerned about the addiction stuff. And so we went in front of the judge, and I was completely calm, and was, I don't know, just I think a lot more emotionally strong, mentally strong. And my ex was himself, and the judge ruled in my favor. And it's funny, after my ex through his lawyer wanted to negotiate, and my lawyer was like, "No, the judge said what he said. You can take it to appeals, though." So that was nice to finally get a little victory in the legal system. But I know I was lucky, because we didn't have a ton of evidence, and I've heard.
Well, they had. So did they put restrictions on him, like
only on him,
and tested or whatnot? Or
yeah, well, basically he can't drink around the child. I couldn't get the testing and all that. That's and unfortunately, because I do go to Al-Anon, and I've heard the stories of people who've been in similar situations, and it's taken some time. Sometimes I have to go to a lot of meetings, and I find somebody who's like, "Oh, let me tell you about what what happened to somebody I know." It's sort of a waiting game. I hope nothing happens to my child, and this is a fear I live with every day, and this is something I worry about every day. That I hope I'm not settling. I hope I'm recognizing my limitations. That fighting, like, oh, my ex can't see his, well, I don't want to fight that my ex can't see his son, because I've also met people who came from messy divorces, and they didn't get to see their father or their mother, and have so much resentment and anger.
Yeah.
And it's really better to let the child, and this is even the research, even, in Florida, the research, you have to take a parenting class before you get divorced. The research is that, let the children develop their own opinion of their parent. Don't put ideas in their head.
Yeah.
What you can do is generally teach about safety. I can generally teach them about safety, that, okay, if you're in a car and someone's driving strangely, this is as my son gets older. He's not old enough quite for this, but I can generally teach him about safety.
But you can start in that. I mean, that's important no matter what. That's something that we talk about with Forget Me Not Advocacy Group, is teaching children to understand boundaries and what is healthy and what is not. And I don't just mean, contact. As they grow, there are different types of healthy and unhealthy relationships that they will encounter. And you can talk about that in very broad terms, and it still means the same.
Yeah,
if it's what they experience with a parent, with an uncle, with an aunt, with a grandparent, with the neighbor, with a dating partner, it's all the same,
Absolutely.
With what is healthy and what is not healthy.
No, absolutely. And in the first podcast, I think I talked about growing up. I mean, my parents put a lot of pressure on me, and it was just, the environment of kind of petty insults, and that's what I grew up with, and I didn't know any better. Now I realize there's a way to express yourself that doesn't hurt the other person. You can love somebody but not like them at that moment, right? And it's just, there's a healthier way to sort of deal with a lot of these things, and I'm trying to teach that to my son. So, kind of looking back now, I've been divorced for several months, and so the alimony that his lawyer offered me, guess what? He hasn't been paying that. I was supposed to get a nice...
It was an olive branch to get what he wanted.
I think he made one payment and then stopped. Same with the child support. And part of me is also like, well, I don't want the money. And he was supposed to give me this big... payment out of our businesses and values of everything. He never made that big payment. So a bunch of stuff he was supposed to do, he hasn't done. I mean, it's a piece of paper right now.
Which then forces you to have to go back to court and
spend money on an attorney. Yeah. So after all this, I was like, you know what? I can make my own money. Let me focus on that. Let me focus on getting my life back, getting back, into fully financial self-sufficiency. I mean, for a little while I thought, oh great, I won't have as much pressure about getting back into my big career. I can, actually not have to work 60 hours a week. Maybe I could work like, some other job that's 40 hours a week, and I have this extra support coming in. I can pay off these debts. Now I'm like, no, I have to be a provider and a nurturer for my son, long term and maybe even short term now. And my ex did that. That didn't really get to me. My lawyer sent a letter, and then finally, like, okay, let's just stop representation now. I'll hire you again when I have a little bit more money again. And, hopefully within the next 6 months or 5 months, whatever it is. And meantime, my ex starts amping it up. Next, he doesn't let me see my child. They have video calls. We have video calls. So when the child's with me, he has a call with dad. When the child's with dad, he has a call with me. Well, when the child's with me, he's been teaching my son, repeat after me, my mom is a bitch. And saying, you're a bitch mom, and all sorts of stuff, right? And that, I don't respond. I don't stop. People said, do you stop the call? And I said, I haven't. And actually a counselor told me, well, afterwards you should explain to your son that was bad words. You shouldn't say that. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I was just completely ignoring it because everyone scares me about don't interfere in the parent-child relationship. But there's other ways. I don't have to say, oh, your daddy's a drunk, watch out. I can say, if someone's driving strangely or acts funny, you can call me, you can call the police, 911.
And I would think that you can say those words that Daddy said for you to call me. Those are not nice words.
Yeah, those are not nice words.
I would like if you did not
use that word. And
because he doesn't know. He doesn't know that that's a bad word.
No, he's a preschooler.
He's mimicking what he hears.
And it's funny, we're watching Lady and the Tramp, that old movie, and I think they said something in that movie about bitch, and my son's like, oh, and I was like, oh my gosh. So kids are here. Kids hear. They hear everything. He knows. I could see in my son's expression. Another call, his dad was completely drunk, and I remember my son was saying, like, Daddy, stop acting like that. So he knows. My son knows, and I just have, I'm still figuring it out. What's the right way to teach him that, look, you don't have to tolerate bad behavior. You try to look for the good in everyone, but don't tolerate the bad behavior. Don't excuse the bad behavior. I'm still figuring it out. I'm not there yet, but I'm still figuring it out because, it is to his benefit to have some sort of relationship with his father. I'm watching very closely if his father starts being abusive towards my son, because it's hard to be abusive towards a baby because, he wasn't that involved, but it's hard. I think it's hard to be abusive towards a baby. They're so innocent and all that. Although maybe it wouldn't be hard, but I don't know. At least I haven't seen that.
It depends on the person, yeah. But emotional and psychological abuse is tough with a little.
Yeah, when they don't understand.
That it can't be done, but they don't understand. Yeah. But they come to understanding is the issue.
And my ex has been he'll do these things because, again, I'm sticking to, it's in our agreement. We only communicate in writing only about our child, nothing else. That's not good enough for my ex. My ex will refuse to let me. We try to do exchanges at the school, but sometimes it's in person. My ex will refuse. Unless you speak to me right now, I'm not going to let you see your son. And he's left, not let me see my son. We're going back to court, obviously. I'm at the point where I realize I might be back in court with him until my son's 18, maybe even beyond.
Likely.
And
sadly.
Yeah, and I just have to budget for it. Some people save for retirement. I guess I have to save every year for legal fees or something. I don't know. And because, I was in a money crunch, I didn't file anything in court. And then, again, I'm letting him get away with this stuff. I document. I'm like, okay, again, trying to within 6 months, right? And I'm really at the point where I'm like, okay, you can refuse to let me see my son, but I will not let you ruin my day. I will still make the most out of the day. Yes, I will have my tears. I have had that. The couple of times when he's not let me see my son, I've had my tears, and then I go, try to make the most of the day anyways. And then usually the next time I do see my son, meantime, my ex is taking me to court saying he can't see what my house looks like, and oh gosh, what other things? Saying I'm not giving him documents that I'm supposed to, which I have, but again, just because he knows I didn't have representation, so just all these lies. Putting in things in there, conditions that don't exist. That, she's supposed to respond to my emails within 4 hours. There's no condition about that.
And it absorbs your legal money, your legal fees, so that you can't come after him for the things he knows. Yeah, you have the right to come after him for.
So I didn't have a lawyer, so someone told me, well, try to just represent yourself. So I tried to delay things a little bit. Oh, yeah, that doesn't work. First of all, it's so hard.
Nobody saw my face, but it's like, no, don't do that.
The people I think
especially against
against someone
that know.
People that know. And finally, my parents actually stepped in. And this is where I'm so grateful, and I realized my privilege. Okay, it helped that my ex contacted my parents. He's not supposed to interfere in my life anymore, according to our agreement, against the paper. But it's it's a court signed agreement.
He's supposed to follow it.
Yeah, he's supposed to follow it.
They don't necessarily do that oftentimes.
I realized enforcement's a whole other thing, and my parents got so annoyed that they're like, "Look, we'll let you borrow the money to hire your lawyer again."
Good.
And I talked to my parents like, "Well, I have to do this and this and this, and I have to, I filed this and that." And they said, "This is so much." And they basically, he reached out to them. My ex reached out to them, and okay, so they're paying for a lawyer again. I'm really trying to manage the fees with that, but we finally did our own motion, listing out everything. Oh my goodness! Once everything. Our contempt motion, which is basically these are the things he's violating, went in, his behavior changed like that. Because I assume his lawyer had no idea that he was withholding the child from me, that he has not been paying the things he's supposed to, that he's teaching my son to call his mama a bitch and sending me nasty emails and, all this sort of stuff. So his behavior's changed, but I know that abuse is cyclical, and I've noticed that myself. And there may be also some things with his addictions going on. Maybe he's medicating himself, but abuse is definitely cyclical.
Abuse is abuse.
And I'm seeing that even now, even though I'm not with him, even though there's the physical contact, he hasn't physically attacked me in a long time, I'm still seeing that there's that honeymoon period. For me, the honeymoon period is he's following the rules. It's kind of sad. Following the rules.
The status quo.
Yeah, the status quo is the honeymoon period. That's when I relax. I realize I can't relax too much. Just enjoy it, but don't relax, because then there's the build-up, tension building. That's when I'll start getting a nasty email. When when
you're not pushing back, when you're relaxed, then that's his go ahead to start picking, picking and picking.
He starts picking up, and then there'll be some sort of explosion, which explosion might be, okay, you can't see your son because you're not speaking to me. Mm-hmm. And it's sad because my son watches this, and my son has even been asking me just talk to daddy, and my son was crying to me the other day. I think he's a preschooler, limited expression, but I think he was basically saying do you think why don't you just talk to daddy so you can see me? And I was trying to explain to my son look, there's rules. Mommy and daddy have to follow rules, and I have to follow the rule too. Of course, I'll do anything to see you, but I have to follow the rules too. And I know, didn't I see you later anyways? And it's hard.
And he doesn't understand.
Yeah, he doesn't understand. All he's seeing is that you didn't talk to daddy, or daddy. I think his dad was trying to hand me something, and I was just I used the typing fingers to basically indicate email it to me. Don't hand me something. I don't know if it's some love letter. I have no idea.
No, you want to send it, send it.
Yeah, I want all documented in writing, basically what he's doing, and I'm really strong about that. And but my son says, why didn't you take daddy's paper? I mean, all this sort of stuff. And I'll have to really work hard on that. And I've met, because I keep on going to support groups, I've also joined this group called it's a court watch group, basically, Families Against Court Travesties, and that I've learned also more about the legal kind of complications that can happen. And sometimes I used to think, wow, did my lawyers really mess up? Did they just do a bad job? But now I'm seeing that, wow, if we had gone really full throttle and gotten guardian ad litems and all these evaluations and psychological stuff, things get extremely complicated. They can actually end up backfiring. And now I'm sort of realizing, wow, maybe my lawyer did the best he could. Maybe they all did the best they could. And also,
it's a broken system.
Yeah, the system is broken. And also, ultimately, I can't expect them to save me. I have to save myself. I have to advocate for myself. And the smarter I am about these things, the more I can be sort of that critical thinker about what they're doing and bring up, should you do this? Can you do that? And and I'm still figuring it out. I have to deal with him for a long time. I hate to say it, sometimes I'm just waiting for him to get into trouble again. Honestly, sometimes I'm at a point where when he does something bad, especially if he writes me a nasty email, I'm kind of yes, more evidence. And I'm trying to treat it like that. I am at a point where he says nasty things to me. Oh, he's even tried to claim my lawyer talks bad about me to his lawyer. He's trying gaslighting still. And claims the people at school, my son's preschool, are talking bad about me. I go talk to them. Hey, I just wanted to clarify, how this works and that everything's fine.
And that is something that so many people just don't get. Sadly. And I've seen this. I've seen this in our peer groups. I've seen this when I talk to women. I've seen this in people that are newly out of even toxic relationships. Even if they maybe are kind of on that borderline where, yes, they're probably abusive, but, it's hard to nail it down. But you see this where they feed these lies, and I mean, that right there is a huge sign that you're being abused, because they're lying to put you down. And it's sad for me, as I know it is for you, to see your child witnessing this.
Yeah.
Because you as a mother are trying so hard to teach him right and to be focused and, but that's hard to do. That's very hard to do in an atmosphere where you have to keep your emotions in check. You have to heal. You have to be strong. And in a lot of ways, it takes time to be strong. And, I think you're constantly having your wounds reopened.
Yeah.
Even if it's good. Like, I like what you said. You said, I'm looking at those nasty behaviors as, oh, good, it's more evidence. And that's good, because you're retraining your mind and your body to see it as what it is, bad behavior.
Yeah, and I'm really, I mentioned, I feel like I'm going into war. I see this as a long war, and I want to win the war in the sense of I want to maintain my rights long term and do what's best for my son long term. I may lose some battles along the way, but I want to win that war. And winning that war long term, legally it's hard until I get a lot of evidence against my ex. It's really hard, but emotionally I can definitely beat him. If I, even want to think about beating him, but I can be emotionally stronger than him.
Beating him
and let
isn't beating him down. You're not talking about, trying to sue him for, trying to take him for things that aren't yours. This is fighting, like you said, fighting for yourself, for your freedom, for what belongs to you. I don't think people realize how, people get divorced all the time. People get divorced because they fall out of love. People get divorced because somebody cheats. People get divorced because they can't deal financially with each other. Whatever their reasons are, people get divorced all the time. But when you're getting divorced due to abuse, there's just so much more to it. It's like you said, you have the old hurts, and then they're being compounded by new hurts, and that cycle of abuse never goes away. It never goes away, because you can't fix a person that doesn't think that they need fix.
Yeah.
You can't make them be somebody they're not. And
I always used to wonder when I'd hear the statistic about abusers don't change, and I was like, well, how? There's some people, nowadays, like self-help and self-discovery is such a thing, but some people fake a lot. And, even my ex, I may have mentioned this during the first podcast, and you mentioned it today, that these are people who on the outside are very charming, can be very charming, seem successful, seem educated, seem like a nice person. And my ex was even being recruited by the liberal, the Democratic Party for a little while, through people he knew in law school, to get more involved and this and that. And I remember thinking, this makes no sense. My ex was involved with domestic violence causes. He was on a board of a domestic violence charity. He's, think about liberal party, especially supporting women's rights and rights and all of that. And how could he act this way? But I think he was doing it to impress people. And I have to look at everything my ex does is in that way. He cares so much about what people think.
Yeah.
And me, the fact that I left, he's like, how dare she? People are wondering, how could such a nice person leave me? I can't worry about it too much, but when I'm puzzled, I have to realize, he cares so much what people think. That I shattered that image of him being this amazing person, amazing father, amazing son, amazing lawyer, amazing, boss, amazing whatever. And I don't. Mutual friends we had, I don't even speak to anymore. I make a point to not tell people too much about what happened. Especially, mutual friends that are my friends, obviously,
Right.
I don't think I have any restrictions legally or otherwise. I have to speak to friends, right? And share what happens, in an appropriate way. But it still bothers him. And maybe people are asking him questions. Actually, people I barely know have reached out to be concerned about his behavior. And then that's always tricky because I'm like, is this a like a spy, or is this person generally concerned, you know? And I'm just very neutral about it. Oh, that's too bad, you know, that's too bad. And I'm just very neutral about it until I know better. And, you know, I see he's going down a certain path. I just have to be patient, but aware. People, I mean, I'm constantly, again, doing safety plan for myself. I've the Homeland Security color rating system. I have that for myself with my ex. So right now I'm in,
excellent.
you know,
like
red is like, okay, he's, you know, taking my son. He's doing something crazy. Orange is, I think, you know, he's building up. He's probably going to do something. Right now I'm in yellow. Right now he's sort of been calm. I think it's because illegal stuff was recently filed and his lawyer's kind of keeping him in check. Green, I don't think we're ever in green. Green is like if I travel with my son to another country, which we haven't done, you know, then I might feel like green, right? That he won't find me here and I'm fine.
He can't find you and you're safe to be free and be relaxed.
Yeah, be relaxed. But I never can be, I can never truly be relaxed. And I just have to learn to live with it and not let it be something that I feel sorry for myself, pity, why do I have to deal with this? It's fine. People deal with all sorts of things and I can be strong and I can choose to treat it as something I have to deal with and manage and give it its time and place, and then I can have a wonderful, great life. And it's really funny because today I'm the most in debt, most broke financially I've ever been. I'm also the fattest I've ever been. I'm one of those emotional eaters. I'm trying to work on that, trying to be healthy. But in a way, I feel like the strongest I've ever been emotionally as well. And, you know, people just don't get to me anymore. I was taking this, it was a free class I was doing on advanced leadership that this professor from a local university was doing. And there was somebody in that class, you know, somebody who just didn't like me for some reason and would, in the class, talk bad about me. And I remember I left and I was a little bit rattled, but I was like, you know, I just, you know, just kind of apologized to the person. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I offended you. And then she kept on going on and on. I think there was something going on with her. And the professor, you know, I didn't get rattled by it. I didn't get upset. It didn't make me lose sleep. I've come a long way. Not perfect. I still have my times. I'm snippy with my son because I'm just so stressed out, and afterwards I have to apologize to him that, sorry, the reason I don't want to play with you right now is Mama has to do work. And
that's normal behavior for anybody in any situation. But I think when you realize where you could be if you had stayed, and you compare that to where you are is such a better place.
Yes. I might not have the money, the cars, the vacations.
None of that matters, right?
It doesn't matter. And yeah, it doesn't matter. And it's, you know, like I said, I still go to domestic violence support groups, and I've met some women who go back, or some women who use unhealthy coping mechanisms. You know, you see them drinking or hooking up with people and trying to find somebody to replace that void in their life. And I feel very blessed that somehow I've avoided that. And those moments of hopelessness, I get over those. I still have my days that I'm down.
I'll tell you how I think you did that is you got the help that you needed from the beginning. From the beginning. And I applaud you for that. That is not easy to do, but it is so important. And you know, I tell women all the time, like, yes, safety planning. And once you get out, obviously, sometimes you still have to safety plan, but get the help that you need, even if you don't think you need it. Even if you don't think you need it, get that support. Go to a peer group. Go to therapy. Call your local shelter and ask them what classes they have. Talk to victim services if you have legal issues. You have to get that support. When you don't, you tend to go to those unhealthy mechanisms of dealing because you haven't dealt with your pain and your confusion and all of those things head on.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's at
huge.
shelter, I saw even some women, you could just tell that they have a lot of pain they carry. I mean, they might seem really strong and tough on the outside and laughing.
And it's still very raw then, too.
But then something will come up and you just see their expression change, and then they quickly snap out of it. And you know it's just there behind the surface. And it's hard. It's hard to open up and just let all that pain out. But you have to find some way. And yeah, if it's getting individual therapy, it's not for everyone. You know, some people have to work up to that. Some people just go listen to other stories, go to group, just be quiet and listen.
Just
some
knowing
people,
you're not alone and learning coping mechanisms and learning how to approach things is huge.
Yeah.
It's not always about therapy. It's not always even about groups, but just you have to get whatever support you need. And if you think that you're just going to be fine, I think that's just a very poor choice on top of on top of the situation you're in, because we all need support when we're going through this, when you're leaving, when you've been there, when you've been abused. And I feel like I need to point out again, and I will beat this horse to death, but abuse, that emotional abuse, the psychological abuse, the gaslighting, the verbal abuse, those are all things that affect you long term. I believe even more than the physical abuse. The scary part is that very often people that are emotionally and verbally, as you experienced and as I experienced, that people that are psychologically abusive escalate sooner or later to physical abuse. And physical abuse has the potential to kill you. And I know women who have been maimed. I know women that have permanent health issues and who have been killed because they ignored the signs and because they thought, oh, well, he's not hitting me yet. He's not beating me yet, so I'm not abused. But you are.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is great, and I think it's great you're doing this podcast so people can maybe understand better what abuse really is. Before it happened to me, when my ex was on the domestic violence board, at that nonprofit board, I would hear some stories about some of the people who went through abuse, and the psychological part I never understood because I wasn't there. I didn't hear it. I didn't experience it.
Yeah.
And when it's your partner, your life partner, someone who's not a complete monster. If they're a complete monster, you wouldn't love them, right?
I don't think any of them are complete monsters, and that's another important. You wouldn't love them if they were that way. For some reason, you fell in love with them.
It's that good part that keeps you hooked, and when they do these things, you start to just doubt yourself and not know it's real anymore, and it just sneaks up on you, and it's, I know I personally sometimes look to the old days and like, wow, people didn't used to get, that affected by all of this, but we're in a different day and age now. We all have grown up in a different situation. We're privileged. Those of us who live in, in a advanced country, developed country like the United States or, wherever you want to name. And things do get to us. And I used to judge, for example, like the millennials or, like the younger generation. Oh, they get so, they're not used to like rejection and they take it so hard. Yes, some of them are not used to rejection. They take it hard. But guess what? Hopefully they learn from that and get used to it.
Right.
For me, I mentioned the first podcast. Yeah, I had, kind of dysfunctional family growing up, but it wasn't that bad. We always had food, it wasn't that bad. And in that sense, this was a lot harder for me to go through. And I have guilt a little bit about that. And I've talked, I think, many times about my privilege. I understand I have privilege here. A lot of people don't have parents that can help them. Yeah. They don't, maybe because I was so strong, I left so soon. I left right away. I was like, this is ridiculous. Physically hitting.
You kind of did, but you kind of didn't.
Yeah, I kind of didn't.
You stayed through years of emotional abuse before. For you, it registered when he started actually physically attacking you. So
and there's women I know who deal with that for 10 years, for years and years, and and it's hopefully we're all more sensitive. I know I'm a lot more sensitive now to when people go through something difficult, and instead of judging like, well, that's not so bad, you should be tough and all that, realize, hey, everyone's coming from a different position. Some people just haven't been in certain situations, and the best thing to do is to just support them. You don't have to help fix them. You don't have to take on their issues, but just, maybe try not to judge. And I really try not to judge as well. including abusers. I mean, I'm sure abusers, there's something going on in their past, something's going on. However, that doesn't mean I have to tolerate it.
Right.
Doesn't mean I have to help you. No. We all, there's a point we all have to take responsibility when you're an adult, especially when you're in an advanced country and come from privilege, to know this isn't right. This isn't okay what I'm doing. And I think deep down inside, a lot of these abusers know they're out of control. They're doing something wrong, but I can't make you decide to get help. And in fact, it's harmful for me to try to get you to get help. So I just have to get out of the way and let you experience the consequences of your actions. And hopefully something will happen in your life to help you also find, peace, or humble yourself enough to change and realize you're doing harm and not hate yourself that I can't believe I hurt all those people all these years. Instead just realize, look, you can apologize, whatever. And, it's funny, a woman I know recently from one of my support groups, she only experienced verbal abuse so far, and nothing physical yet, but a lot of crazy verbal abuse, gaslighting. And she said, hey, I think I'm going to go back to him. We had a really big heart-to-heart, and we cried. He's going to go to counseling, this and that. And, I just said, okay, well, listen to your gut. I said, I can't tell you what to do. You have to decide what's right for you. But I know I personally would watch his actions rather than his words. And over a long period of time, a lot of people will fake it for a year. They'll go to therapy just to make the person happy. A year later, they start acting that way again. People ask me, would you ever take your ex back? I'm like, I'd have to see a major personal transformation over 5 years, period. I would not believe it. And I think my ex does. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if he's still trying to get back together. I don't know why he insists on trying to talk to me. I have nothing to say to you. Anything you have to say to me, write to me.
It's control. It's control.
Yeah.
And that's really what it boils down to. He lost control and power over you, and he wants it back. And if he can't have it with you under the same roof, then he will find a way to assert that power and control over you. And that means by belittling you, bad-mouthing you, threatening you. And he probably cannot stand that you refuse to speak to him.
Yeah.
Because that takes away his control.
Yeah. And instead, like you said at the beginning, if someone said, I don't want you to speak to me, I'd be like steering clear.
Okay.
Hands up, okay, walking away, stepping away slowly, and then running, because I am not going to speak to somebody who doesn't want to speak to me. No. And it's funny.
If you've ever experienced, and like a breakup, and you're the one that gets dumped, and you need to know why that person, you need closure, or you have a friend that's mad at you, and you need to know. That needing to have that feedback, that needing to have that person not cut off communication with you can be overpowering even to the most stable individual in the world. When you're talking about a narcissist, that is just laying an entire new layer and level that, I always say, I don't understand. I hope to be able to interview somebody that can give us some insight into that. And, what does the mind of an abuser look like? Because we can't comprehend that because we don't think that way. We don't function that way.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of, I hadn't thought about it that way, that when someone really needs to know, like, why didn't this person do this? Or, why did they leave me? Or why did they reject me? Or, but I feel like for me, most of the time, like especially when I'm thinking about like jobs, for example, I really wanted that job, and even looking back over my life, at some point you realize I'm not going to get the answer, so
precisely,
move on.
You have those feelings maybe for a few days, maybe for a couple weeks, maybe for a couple months, you know? But the rational side of you comes around, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this person really doesn't want me. I need to let that go.
Yeah.
But again, we're not talking about rational behavior. So I think that's, that's something I've kind of decided that I will never understand. And I also think that I know that, like you said, there's no excuse for the behavior. So yes, they probably are not okay. They probably need help. They probably have some kind of instability. Maybe they were abused. Maybe they have addiction issues. Whatever it is that causes them to be the person that they are, again, it's kind of irrelevant. because it doesn't excuse their behavior. And as an individual, it is my responsibility to be responsible for me and to put up those boundaries, because I cannot fix you, the abuser.
Yeah.
And so I have to separate myself from you, the abuser. And it doesn't matter what's causing it, because none of that's an excuse. It's me taking my personal happiness and safety and keeping that in mind. And that's what's important at the end of the day.
And I think actually it's also important to respond appropriately when someone's treating you poorly, which is to shut them out of your life. I mean, I think there's a way to respond with love, which is, okay, I'm not going to try to hurt you back, but I'm going to step away and not speak to you anymore.
Yes.
With my ex, I think I'm being very gentle by saying, I will respect your 50% time with our child, or 49%, whatever it is. And I will not, when you write me a nasty message, I won't say, well, you're this and that. Right? I will just ignore it. I will add it to my evidence file,
Right.
And to me, that's like, my kindness for the world, love for the world sort of approach to somebody who's a nasty, awful person is like, look, I'm not going to try to harm you, mess up your life, but I'm just going to
You're not going
put up a door, put a wall, and say, okay, ignore.
But you have no space here.
You have no space here, no
world.
help. And when my ex asked me for a favor, like, oh, can you watch our son another night? If I can't watch him, nope, I'm sorry. And I won't let him manipulate me that way either. He still tries to manipulate me with things about our child. And I'm like, okay, I have to I'm going to pay attention to my own five senses, and I'm going to look at the child, I'm going to investigate. And no, it's actually not that big of a deal that, maybe something happened at school, and I personally don't think it's that big of a deal. I spoke to his teacher, I spoke to whatever. I'm not going to let him manipulate me that way. And same thing with the money, right? That's why I don't know if he expects me to go beg him, please pay me alimony, child support, whatever. And I think that infuriates him. I think that's why he ended up suing me.
He wants a response.
Yeah, he wants a response. Yeah. And then guess what? I did my response, and now he's changing his tune. And it's the stronger I get, the harder he's trying, and I know that. Fortunately, I can recognize that, and just constantly try to be the strongest I can be emotionally. Take that time to go to groups, journal. I do gratitude. I don't do it daily. I try to do it daily, but my top 3 things I'm grateful for today, I try to do that. It's a quick, easy way for me to change my attitude about the day. When my ex has done stuff where he, does a showdown with our child and doesn't let me have my child the day I'm supposed to, afterwards, I'll just sort of say, okay, 1, thank you, God, that no one got physically hurt today. 2, thank you, God, that I'm able to lock my doors, so even if he did try to get, do something with my car, I'm, safe at least for a few moments. I really get down to that level, and it does change my attitude, and it takes away that toxicity he's trying to put on me, and whatever he's trying to do to me to affect me. And it's, if he's feeling miserable about this and he feels a victim, I'm sorry, that's your problem. If he's angry that I don't respond to him, you can't control another person. There's most things in life we can't control.
That is for sure.
We can't control most things in life. We all have to just get over it and just appreciate what we can control. But you have to be willing to take personal responsibility and be in a healthy space mentally, and to do that. And abusers just aren't that way. And this trying to fix people. I've heard some women get caught into this trap, like, oh, we went through a lot. One thing I've learned, I try to emphasize to people, is it needs to come from within, from them. There's a lot of people out there, whether it's addiction or abuse, they'll, oh, you're right, I shouldn't do that. I've heard of abusers who are actually generally remorseful after, but then they do it again. Yeah, and until they reach that point inside where they're like, I will not do this a single additional time, you can't fix it for them. And
it's very hard for that behavior to be changed, even with the intervention programs that are in place. And it's difficult, just like you have to make a daily decision to be thankful, a daily decision. And I think that's something people might not understand, is that we talk a lot on this podcast, and we will continue to talk a lot on this podcast about the fact that there is a beautiful life after abuse, that you can get to the other side, that you can get away from this negativity and this depression and this anxiety, and you can live a healthy, happy, enjoyable life. But it's not a light switch. You can't just say, oh, I'm not sad anymore, I'm happy, and I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to stay happy, and life is great, and yay. It doesn't work that way. It is a daily decision. Some days I find myself minute to minute having to make a decision that I am not going to let this bother me, that I am going to be happy, that I am going to be thankful, that I'm going to be grateful. And it's a process of keeping yourself in a good place mentally and emotionally. And then, obviously, like most things, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. So instead of maybe 5 years ago where I would have a handful of good days out of maybe the year, that were truly good days for real, that I was feeling positive about myself, now I have a handful of bad days a year where I slip back into that depression and that anxious mood and it's every day making that decision. And for abusers, it would be the same thing. They would every day have to make that decision that they're going to live their life differently. And sadly, that's not the case for most. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to add, or any message that you would like to give women or men that find themselves in a similar situation to what you went through?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know what I can say after what you said. I mean, you understand, I think, abuse.
I've been there.
Yeah, you've been there, and you've met people and had some really amazing conversations, I think. And I guess I would just say that everyone, no matter what you've ever done in your life, whatever mistakes you make today, now, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, and to put yourself first, put your opinions first. Yes, you can listen to all sorts of opinions from different types of people, but ultimately you can make the choice, and it doesn't have to be a perfect choice. And you can change your mind tomorrow. It's perfectly fine to change your mind.
I like that. True.
But just believe in yourself. I mean, it's hokey, it sounds cheesy, but it's true. Believing in yourself means putting your own opinion first. Choosing to change your mind if you want to change your mind. Choosing to not go back, or go back and then decide not to go back. And don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid. I went through a lot of shame and embarrassment. I'm mostly over it now. I still choose to respect my own privacy. I don't necessarily go out telling everybody what I went through or the struggles I have now. That we all have a right to privacy. Even though in our social media age, we have a right to privacy. Do your best, but also don't be embarrassed, because there are a lot of people out there who understand. There's a lot of people out there who want to help. So if you're in an abusive situation right now, or know someone who is, believe me, there's a lot of people out there who would love to help, and help however you want it, whether it's just give you an idea, really help you, from getting you out of that situation, getting into all sorts of services, whatever it is, to just maybe temporary help. I mean, there's so much help out there. You may have to keep on trying until you find it, but there's so much you can do. There's a better life you can live. You can live a life that you want, and just, again, believe in yourself. We all have some amazing gifts to offer the world. I truly believe in that. We all have our unique talents. And no matter what mistakes, again, that we've made, or things we don't do well, we still have amazing things that we can do well, and every day is a new day. And if you have to take it minute by minute, like every minute is a new minute, do that.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay too.
It happens. Well, thank you so much. Your story, I think, is very powerful, and I appreciate you giving it the time, because I know it took a lot of time for you to meet me and to talk, and then we have, all the before and after. So I really appreciate that, because I think you're going to help a lot of people to have a better connection, either as victims, as survivors, or as people that, want to have a better understanding of what abuse can look like. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again.